What would you do if the woman you insulted and humiliated turned out to be the billionaire who controlled your entire life? Evelyn Westwood was supposed to be just a harmless old janitor. Or so they thought. But when her disguise comes off, the world will learn what it means to cross a woman with power, money, and a ruthless desire for control. Stay tuned, because tonight, the truth will cost more than anyone ever imagined. The elevator doors slid open with a metallic hiss, and Evelyn Westwood stepped into the bustling corporate lobby, her cane tapping rhythmically against the marble floor. Her silver hair was tucked beneath a plain gray cap, her wrinkled hands clutching a mop and bucket as she moved unnoticed through the sea of designer suits and clacking heels. Today, she was not Evelyn Westwood, billionaire matriarch and CEO of Westwood Enterprises. Today, she was just another invisible janitor. Employees brushed past her without a second glance, eyes fixed on their phones, voices rising with gossip and laughter. Evelyn's lips pressed into a thin line as she moved closer to the reception desk, where a group of young women gathered, chatting animatedly. "Did you see the ring Lily's wearing?" One of them sneered, her blood-red nails tapping against the counter. "Yeah, right." Another girl scoffed. Like Daniel Westwood would actually marry that nobody. She's just a secretary. A pretty face. Evelyn's eyes narrowed beneath the brim of her cap as she watched them snicker, the laughter sharp and cruel, each word twisting like a knife. Evelyn continued pushing the mop, her gaze scanning the floor until she spotted her target, Lily Evans. Lily was kneeling on the floor, gathering scattered files with shaky hands, her cheeks flushed with embarrassment. Vanessa Blake, head of marketing and the queen of corporate cruelty, loomed over her, a wicked smirk plastered across her flawless face. "Oops," Vanessa cooed, feigning innocence as she kicked another file toward Lily, sending it skidding across the floor. "Looks like you missed one?" The girls at the desk laughed, their voices echoing through the lobby like the cawing of crows. Lily swallowed hard, forcing a tight smile as she reached for the file, her fingers trembling. "Thank you," she said softly, voice barely above a whisper. Evelyn's jaw clenched as she watched, every instinct screaming to step forward, to unleash the full force of her power on Vanessa and her pack of hyenas. But she couldn't. Not yet. Not until she saw what Lily was truly made of. Taking a deep breath, Evelyn tightened her grip on the mop and deliberately nudged the bucket, sending a wave of dirty water splashing across Vanessa's stiletto heels. Gasps echoed through the lobby as Vanessa leaped back, eyes blazing. "You stupid old hag," she screeched, her face twisting into a mask of fury. "Do you have any idea how much these cost?" Evelyn kept her gaze down, her shoulders hunched, her hands shaking as if with fear. "I'm so sorry," she mumbled, her voice trembling. "I didn't mean to—" "Save it," Vanessa snapped, her face inches from Evelyn's, eyes flashing with malice. "Maybe if you weren't so ancient and useless, you wouldn't be spilling water everywhere." The girls at the desk snickered, some pulling out their phones, capturing every humiliating second as Vanessa continued her tirade. "People like you shouldn't even be here," Vanessa sneered, her voice dripping with venom. "Why don't you just retire already? Or better yet, drop dead?" The words echoed through the lobby, bouncing off the marble walls, the laughter sharp and cruel, cutting through Evelyn like shards of glass. But then, a soft voice broke through the chaos. "That's enough!" Vanessa turned sharply, eyes narrowing as Lily stepped forward, her shoulders squared, her chin high. "Leave her alone," Lily said, her voice firm, eyes blazing. It was just an accident. Vanessa's lip curled, a cruel smile spreading across her face. "Oh, look," she sneered. "The secretary thinks she's a hero. How cute." But Lily didn't back down. She moved closer to Evelyn, gently taking the mop from her trembling hands, her touch warm and steady. "I'll take care of this," Lily said softly, her eyes meeting Evelyn's. "Are you okay?" Evelyn swallowed, her heart pounding, her eyes searching Lily's face for any hint of deception. But all she found was kindness, genuine and pure. "I'm fine," Evelyn whispered, her voice catching. "Thank you." Lily nodded, offering a small, reassuring smile as she bent down to mop the water, Her back turned to Vanessa, who was still seething, fists clenched. Evelyn's gaze hardened as she watched Vanessa stalk away, her heels clicking like gunshots against the marble floor. Today, Vanessa was the queen of Westwood Enterprises, untouchable and cruel. But tomorrow, she would learn exactly who she had just insulted, and Evelyn Westwood would make sure of it. The office buzzed with the hum of phones ringing, keyboards clicking, and gossip whispering like a swarm of wasps. Evelyn moved silently through the maze of cubicles, her janitor cart creaking with each step, her eyes sharp and watchful beneath the brim of her cap. Employees brushed past her, their laughter cold and careless, their eyes sliding over her as if she were nothing but a shadow. But Evelyn wasn't watching them. She was watching Lily. Lily sat at her tiny desk in the far corner, head bowed over a stack of files, her shoulders tense, her fingers trembling as she typed. Across the room, Vanessa leaned back in her leather chair, her manicured nails tapping against her coffee cup, eyes locked onto Lily with a venomous smirk. "Hey, secretary," Vanessa drawled, her voice slicing through the air like a blade. "Can you bring me another coffee? The last one was too bitter." "Just like you." Lily stiffened, her jaw clenching, but she pushed back her chair and rose to her feet, eyes downcast. Evelyn watched, her fists tightening around the mop handle as Vanessa's smirk widened, her eyes glinting with cruel delight. Lily moved toward the coffee machine, head down, cheeks flushed with humiliation. But before she could reach it, Evelyn stepped into her path, her body a protective barrier. "Excuse me, dear," Evelyn said, her voice soft, eyes kind. "Could you help me with this trash bag? My back isn't what it used to be." Lily blinked, her eyes darting to Vanessa, who was still watching, her smile sharp as a knife. Lily swallowed, then nodded, forcing a small smile. "Of course," she said, taking the heavy trash bag from Evelyn's hands. "Here, let me." Vanessa rolled her eyes, a cruel laugh escaping her lips. "Aw, how sweet. Little Miss Secretary is helping the janitor. What a pair of losers." Evelyn's eyes darkened, her jaw tightening, but she kept her expression calm, her voice steady. "Thank you," she said, her eyes locking onto Lily's, a silent message passing between them. "You're very kind." Lily smiled, her eyes warm and sincere. "It's nothing," she said softly, her voice carrying a gentleness that Evelyn hadn't heard in years. "You remind me of my grandmother." A pang shot through Evelyn's chest, and she had to look away, her throat tight, her heart pounding. Her grandmother, the woman who had raised her, who had taught her that kindness was a currency more valuable than gold, the woman she had lost, just before she became the cold, ruthless Evelyn Westwood. Evelyn blinked, clearing her throat, forcing a smile. "Well," she said, her voice quivering slightly, "your grandmother must be a very lucky woman." Before Lily could respond, Vanessa's voice cut through the air like a whip. Secretary Vanessa barked, her face twisted in a sneer. "My coffee! Or do I need to call Daniel and tell him his little fiancé is slacking off again?" Lily's face paled, her eyes dropping to the floor as she handed the trash bag back to Evelyn, her shoulders slumping. "I'm sorry," she whispered, her voice small. "Broken? I have to go." Evelyn watched as Lily hurried toward the coffee machine, Vanessa's laughter echoing through the room like a chorus of vipers. Evelyn's jaw clenched, her nails digging into her palms as she watched Vanessa smirk, her head thrown back, her eyes gleaming with triumph. But Vanessa had no idea that the janitor she had just insulted was actually the woman who held her entire future in the palm of her hand. Evelyn took a slow, deep breath, her eyes narrowing as she watched Lily hand Vanessa the coffee with shaking hands. Vanessa took a long, exaggerated sip, then wrinkled her nose, her lips twisting in disgust. "Ugh," she sneered, dumping the coffee into the trash can. "Figures, can't even do that right?" Lily's eyes shimmered with unshed tears, her hands trembling at her sides. Evelyn's fists clenched, her jaw tightened, her heart pounding with a fury she hadn't felt in years. She had seen enough. As Vanessa strutted away, her heels clicking against the tile like gunshots, Evelyn's eyes followed her, a slow, calculating smile curving her lips. Tomorrow, Vanessa would walk into Westwood Enterprises thinking she was untouchable. Tomorrow, Vanessa would learn exactly how wrong she was, and Evelyn Westwood would be the one to teach her. The next morning, the air in the office was thick with anticipation, whispers snaking through the cubicles like a venomous fog. Vanessa strutted in, heels clicking against the marble floor, her red designer dress hugging her curves like armor. Behind her trailed two assistants, their arms loaded with shopping bags, their eyes fixed downward as Vanessa tossed her hair over her shoulder and smirked. "Move!" she snapped at the janitor blocking her path. Evelyn, the billionaire matriarch in disguise. Evelyn's head was bowed, her hands clutching the mop handle so tightly her knuckles went white. Vanessa's heels clicked dangerously close to Evelyn's foot, her cruel smile flashing as she leaned in, her breath hot and reeking of expensive coffee. "Careful, old lady!" Vanessa hissed, her voice dripping with condescension. "One more spill and you're out of a job." The words echoed, laughter rippling through the room as employees turned to watch, some recording, others snickering. Evelyn's jaw clenched, but she remained silent, her eyes fixed on the floor as Vanessa pushed past her, the hem of her dress whipping against Evelyn's leg like a slap. Evelyn's heart hammered in her chest, fury pulsing beneath her skin, but she swallowed it down, every muscle rigid as she forced herself to remain invisible. Just a janitor, just a nobody. For now, Vanessa marched to her office, her heels stabbing into the carpet like knives. "Lily," she barked, her voice sharp and commanding. Lily flinched, her fingers trembling as she hurried forward, her eyes wary, shoulders tense. Vanessa shoved a stack of files into Lily's arms, the papers spilling over, scattering across the floor. "Pick them up," Vanessa sneered, crossing her arms over her chest, a wicked smile curving her lips. "Unless that's too much for the boss's little girlfriend." Lily swallowed, cheeks flaming as she knelt, scrambling to gather the files while Vanessa loomed over her, her shadow long and menacing. "You know," Vanessa purred, her eyes glinting with malice. "I hear Daniel's ex is back in town. You remember Chloe, don't you? Gorgeous, rich, perfectly suited for someone like him." Lily's fingers trembled, her breath hitching as she kept her eyes down, forcing herself to remain calm, to keep her composure. "I wouldn't get too comfortable," Vanessa continued, her voice lowering to a poisonous whisper. "Because when Daniel realizes you're nothing but a poor, desperate secretary, he'll drop you faster than these files." More laughter erupted, cruel and sharp, slicing through Lily like a blade. Evelyn's eyes narrowed, her fists clenched at her sides as she watched, every nerve in her body screaming to step in, to end this now, but she couldn't. Not yet. Not until she was sure. Vanessa smirked, flipping her hair as she turned on her heel and strutted away, her laughter echoing through the corridor. Lily remained on the floor, her head bowed, her shoulders shaking as she gathered the scattered papers, her fingers brushing against the carpet, eyes shimmering with unshed tears. Evelyn took a deep breath, her jaw tight as she pushed the mop forward, inching closer to Lily. "Are you all right?" dear Evelyn asked softly, her voice gentle, eyes warm and searching. Lily sniffed, hastily wiping her tears as she forced a smile, her chin trembling. "I'm fine," she said, her voice cracking. "Thank you." Evelyn nodded, her heart twisting painfully as she watched Lily stand, clutching the files to her chest like a shield. Evelyn's gaze drifted down to Lily's hands, to the small, silver ring on her finger. Daniel's ring, the ring that Vanessa had mocked. The ring that Lily wore was like the only thing keeping her from falling apart. Evelyn's eyes darkened, her jaw setting as she straightened, shoulders squared, chin high. Vanessa Blake thought she was untouchable. Vanessa Blake thought she could humiliate Evelyn's future daughter-in-law and walk away unscathed. But Vanessa Blake was about to learn the hard way that no one, not even the queen bee of Westwood Enterprises, was untouchable, and Evelyn Westwood was ready to teach her that lesson. The opulent mansion glittered under the setting sun, its towering columns casting long, foreboding shadows across the perfectly manicured lawn. Lily's heels clicked against the marble floor as she stepped inside, her eyes wide, breath catching in her throat. Chandeliers sparkled like constellations above her, and the scent of jasmine and old money lingered in the air. Daniel stood beside her, his hand warm against her back, his smile gentle and reassuring. "You ready?" he whispered, his blue eyes searching hers. Lily forced a smile, her heart pounding like a war drum. "Of course," she said, her voice steady, but inside, nerves coiled like snakes in her stomach. Then, a figure appeared at the top of the grand staircase, descending with regal grace. Evelyn Westwood. Gone was the drab gray cap and janitor's uniform. In its place, Evelyn wore a dark, fitted dress that flowed like ink, diamonds dripping from her ears. Her hair swept back into a flawless chignon. Her eyes, sharp, cold, and piercing, locked onto Lily's, and Lily felt the ground sway beneath her feet. Daniel's mother, the CEO, the woman she had unknowingly defended, pitied, and helped. Lily's pulse thundered in her ears as Evelyn's heels clicked against the marble, each step deliberate, echoing like a judge's gavel. "Mother," Daniel said, stepping forward, his voice warm. "This is Lily, my fiancée." Evelyn's lips curved into a tight, unreadable smile as she extended her hand, her eyes never leaving Lily's. "Lily," she said, her voice smooth as glass, her grip firm and unyielding. "What a pleasure to finally meet you." Lily swallowed, her mouth dry as she forced herself to meet Evelyn's gaze. "It's an honor, Mrs. Westwood," she said, her voice trembling. Evelyn's eyes glinted like shards of glass, and for a split second, Lily thought she saw something flash behind them. Something cold, calculating, dangerous, but it was gone as quickly as it came, replaced by a pleasant, practiced smile. "Come," Evelyn said, gesturing toward the dining room. "Dinner is ready." The dining room was a hall of mirrors and gold, the table set with crystal glasses and gleaming silverware. Servants hovered like shadows against the walls, their eyes downcast. Lily sat beside Daniel, her hands folded in her lap, her heart a hammer against her ribs. Evelyn sat at the head of the table, her posture straight, her expression serene. The meal began. Delicate bites of food served in silence, each clink of silverware echoing like a gunshot in the heavy, suffocating air. Evelyn's eyes never left Lily, studying her every move, every glance, every nervous flick of her fork. "So, Lily," Evelyn said, her voice soft but sharp, slicing through the silence like a blade. "Tell me, how did you and Daniel meet?" Lily swallowed, her cheeks flushing under Evelyn's unrelenting gaze. "We met at the company," she said, forcing a smile. "I was a secretary, and Daniel was her boss," Vanessa interrupted, her voice saccharine, sweet, her eyes glinting with malice from across the table. "Isn't it romantic?" Lily's heart stuttered, her fingers clenching around her fork. Vanessa, sitting at the table like she belonged there, her red lips curving into a smug, victorious smile. Evelyn's eyes flicked to Vanessa, her expression unchanging, but her jaw clenched, a muscle ticking beneath her flawless skin. "Yes," Evelyn said, her voice smooth, her gaze sliding back to Lily. "Romantic." The word dripped from her lips like poison. "But tell me, Lily," Evelyn said, leaning forward, her eyes sharp, unblinking. "What exactly do you love about my son?" The question hung in the air like a noose, the room falling deathly silent. Lily's throat tightened, her palms damp against her thighs. "I love his kindness," she said, her voice small but firm, "his generosity, the way he makes me feel seen, even when the world tries to make me feel invisible." Evelyn's gaze remained fixed, her expression unreadable, and the money, she said, her smile a sliver of ice. "Does that make you feel seen, too?" Lily's cheeks burned, her heart twisting painfully as Vanessa's laugh rang through the room, sharp and mocking. "Oh, come on, Evelyn," Vanessa drawled, twirling her wine glass, her eyes glinting. "You can't blame her. After all, How often does a secretary get a chance to marry a billionaire? Lily's eyes stung, her chest tightening, but she forced herself to sit tall, her jaw clenched. "I love Daniel," she said, her voice shaking but firm. "Not his money. Not his name. Him." Evelyn's eyes darkened, her smile widening, her teeth gleaming like a predator's. "Is that so?" she said, her voice as smooth and sharp as a polished knife. "Well then, Lily, I suppose we'll just have to see about that." And as Evelyn leaned back, her eyes never leaving Lily's, the room fell into a heavy, suffocating silence, the air thick with unspoken threats and unrelenting judgment. The dinner continued, but Lily could no longer taste the food. All she could feel was Evelyn's cold, unyielding gaze boring into her, a silent promise that the real test had only just begun. The following morning, the air in the Westwood mansion was as cold and tense as a winter storm. Lily sat at the grand breakfast table, her fingers wrapped tightly around a steaming cup of coffee, eyes staring blankly ahead. The conversation from last night echoed in her mind, Evelyn's icy voice slicing through her thoughts like shards of glass. "Does that make you feel seen, too?" The words rang like a cruel taunt, venom seeping into every syllable. Lily's heart thudded painfully in her chest as she forced herself to take a sip of the coffee, the bitterness scalding her tongue. Across the room, Evelyn's heels clicked against the marble floor, each step deliberate, echoing like a countdown. Evelyn appeared in the doorway, perfectly composed, dressed in an ivory pantsuit that screamed power and control. Her eyes locked onto Lily, and a small, tight smile curved her lips. "Lily, darling," she said, voice smooth as silk but sharp as a razor. "Can I have a word?" Lily swallowed, her throat tightening, but she managed a nod, setting the coffee cup down with a soft clink. Evelyn's smile widened, but it didn't reach her eyes. "Come with me," she said, already turning on her heel, her posture as straight and unforgiving as a steel rod. Lily followed Evelyn down a long, endless corridor lined with portraits of the Westwood ancestors. Stern-faced men in tailored suits, women draped in pearls and furs, eyes cold and unyielding. It felt like walking through a gallery of ghosts, their eyes following her every step. Finally, they reached the end of the corridor, and Evelyn pushed open a door, revealing a lavish office with floor-to-ceiling windows that framed the sprawling estate like a painting. Evelyn stepped inside, her heels clicking against the polished wood floors, and gestured for Lily to sit. Lily perched on the edge of a plush leather chair, her back straight, hands clasped tightly in her lap. Evelyn moved behind the massive mahogany desk, fingers trailing over a stack of files, her eyes gleaming like a cat watching a mouse trapped in a corner. "I've been doing some thinking," Evelyn said, her voice smooth, each word measured and precise. "About you, about Daniel." Lily's pulse quickened, her skin prickling with dread. "Mrs. Westwood, Tell me something," Evelyn interrupted, leaning forward, her hands folded, her gaze piercing. "If my son weren't a billionaire, if he were just another struggling man with no money, no influence, would you still love him?" The question hung heavy in the air, thick and suffocating. Lily's lips parted, her pulse a frantic drumbeat in her ears. "Yes," she said, her voice trembling but firm. "I would love him no matter what." Evelyn's eyes darkened, her lips curling into a cold, thin smile. "Interesting," she said, her voice dropping to a deadly whisper. "Because I have a little proposal for you." Lily's breath caught in her throat, her heart pounding. Evelyn pulled open a drawer, extracting a sleek black envelope embossed with the Westwood insignia in gold. She slid it across the desk, her nails tapping against the polished wood like a ticking clock. "Inside this envelope is a check," Evelyn said, her eyes boring into Lily's. "A very generous sum, enough to set you up for life, enough to pay off every debt you've ever had, enough to make you very comfortable. But there's a catch." Lily's fingers trembled as she reached for the envelope, her heart pounding like a jackhammer against her ribs. "What's the catch?" she whispered, her voice barely above a breath. Evelyn's smile widened, her eyes gleaming like a predator's in the dark. "You leave my son, she said, her voice as smooth and deadly as a serpent's hiss. You walk away and never come back. You take the money, disappear, and pretend Daniel Westwood never existed. Lily's blood ran cold, her vision blurring as Evelyn's words sank in, each one a nail driving deeper into her heart. You're testing me, Lily said, her voice breaking. This is some kind of test. Evelyn's smile didn't falter, her eyes glinting with ice. Is it, she said, tilting her head, her expression unreadable, or is it just a very generous offer to someone who clearly needs it? Lily's hands shook, the envelope heavy in her lap, the check inside burning through the paper like a brand. Evelyn leaned back, folding her hands over her lap, her expression serene, almost bored. Take your time, she said, her voice a slow, deliberate drawl. But remember, once you make your decision, there's no going back. Lily's heart slammed against her chest, her mind spinning as she stared down at the envelope, the weight of it pressing down on her like a stone. One choice, one decision, one moment that could change everything. And as Evelyn watched her, eyes gleaming, smile tight and cruel, Lily felt the walls closing in, the air growing colder, the room shrinking until it was just her and the envelope and the suffocating realization that no matter what she chose, Evelyn Westwood was not done with her yet. Not even close. Lily sat frozen, her fingers clenching the black envelope so tightly the edges crumpled beneath her grip. The room felt like it was closing in, the walls pressing closer, the air thick and suffocating. Evelyn's eyes bore into her, icy and unblinking, a cobra waiting to strike. Well, Evelyn drawled, her voice smooth and venomous. What will it be? A lifetime of security or a lifetime of struggle? Lily swallowed, her throat dry as sandpaper, her heart pounding like a drum. I don't need your money, she said, her voice shaking but firm. I love Daniel, not his bank account. Evelyn's expression remained calm, her lips curving into a slow, sinister smile. Love, she echoed, her tone mocking. Such a lovely word. But love doesn't pay bills. Does it? Lily's jaw clenched, her cheeks flushing as Evelyn's words sliced through her like a knife. Evelyn leaned forward, her manicured nails tapping rhythmically against the polished mahogany desk. Each tap, a ticking clock counting down to Lily's unraveling. You think love is enough? Evelyn said, her voice dropping to a deadly whisper. Let me show you what happens when love meets power. Before Lily could respond, the office door swung open with a loud crash, and Vanessa stormed in, her face flushed, her eyes wild, her heels stabbing the floor with every furious step. Mrs. Westwood, Vanessa said, her breath coming in sharp, angry bursts. I just got a call from HR. They're terminating me. Me, the top performer in this entire company. They said the order came from you. Evelyn's smile widened, a flicker of amusement dancing in her eyes. Yes, I did hear about that. Vanessa's jaw dropped, her eyes darting between Evelyn and Lily, confusion morphing into rage. You can't do this to me, Vanessa shrieked, her voice echoing through the office like a wail. I have connections. My father. Evelyn raised a hand, and Vanessa's words died in her throat. The room fell deathly silent, the air thick and suffocating. Evelyn rose to her feet, her eyes glinting with cold fire. Your father, Evelyn said, her tone dripping with ice. Your father works for me, and so do you. Or rather, so did you. Vanessa's face went ashen, her chest rising and falling in panicked breaths. You can't do this, she said, her voice cracking, her eyes pleading. I was just bullying my future daughter-in-law. Evelyn snapped, her voice slicing through the room like a whip, publicly humiliating her, threatening her job. Vanessa's mouth opened and closed like a fish gasping for air, her eyes wide and glistening with unshed tears. I didn't mean... Evelyn's lips curled into a cruel, predatory smile. You didn't mean to get caught, she said, stepping closer, her eyes locking onto Vanessa's, cold and unrelenting. But you did. And now, you're done. Vanessa's knees wobbled, her hands trembling as she clutched her purse to her chest like a lifeline. "Please," she whispered, her voice breaking. "Please, Mrs. Westwood, I can change. I can—" Evelyn leaned in, her face inches from Vanessa's, her voice a deadly whisper. "People don't change," she said, her breath cool and steady. "They just get better at hiding what they really are." Evelyn straightened, her gaze flicking to the security guards waiting by the door. "Get her out!" The guards stepped forward, each grabbing one of Vanessa's arms, dragging her toward the exit as she thrashed and screamed, her heels skidding against the polished floor. "This isn't over," Vanessa howled, her eyes wild, her face twisted with fury. "You'll pay for this. You'll—" The door slammed shut, and the room fell into a chilling silence, the only sound the echo of Vanessa's fading screams. Evelyn turned back to Lily, her expression unreadable, her eyes dark and gleaming like polished stones. "You see, Lily," Evelyn said, her voice calm, almost sweet. "That's what power looks like. That's what real control is." Lily's heart pounded, her pulse thundering in her ears, her skin cold and clammy. Evelyn moved closer, her heels clicking against the floor, her smile widening, her eyes gleaming. "So, tell me, darling," Evelyn purred, reaching out to stroke a strand of Lily's hair, her touch light, almost tender. "Are you sure you're ready to walk away from that?" Lily swallowed, her throat tight, her breath shallow, her mind spinning. The envelope lay heavy in her lap, a black, glossy temptation that glimmered beneath the office lights. Evelyn's eyes never left her smile widening, her nails grazing Lily's cheek, leaving a trail of cold fire in their wake. "Are you?" Evelyn whispered, her voice soft and deadly, the scent of her perfume intoxicating, suffocating, lethal. And as Lily sat there, trapped beneath Evelyn's piercing gaze, her heart hammering against her ribs, she realized one terrifying, undeniable truth. This was more than a test. This was a warning, and Evelyn Westwood was just getting started. Lily stumbled out of Evelyn's office, her breath coming in sharp, jagged bursts, the black envelope clutched tightly in her trembling hands. The walls of the Westwood mansion loomed around her like towering prison bars, the air thick and suffocating, the weight of Evelyn's words pressing down on her like a stone. "Are you sure you're ready to walk away from that?" The question echoed in her mind. Evelyn's icy smile seared into her brain like a brand. Lily's pulse thundered as she made her way to the back garden, her heels sinking into the soft grass, the evening wind cold against her flushed skin. Daniel was there, leaning against a marble column, his face turned toward the setting sun, his jaw tense, eyes distant. Lily's heart clenched, a wave of nausea rolling through her. How could she tell him? How could she possibly explain that his mother had just tried to buy her out of his life? The black envelope felt like a lead weight in her hands, each step toward Daniel heavier than the last. Daniel turned at the sound of her footsteps, his expression softening, the golden light catching the flecks of green in his eyes. "Hey," he said, his voice warm, a gentle oasis in the storm raging inside her. "You okay? You look shaken." Lily forced a smile, her lips trembling, her eyes burning with unshed tears. "I'm fine," she lied, her fingers tightening around the envelope. "Just a long day." Daniel's brow furrowed, concern etching lines across his handsome face as he stepped closer, his hand reaching for hers. "You know you can talk to me, right?" he said, his thumb brushing softly over her knuckles. "Whatever it is, you can tell me." Lily's heart twisted painfully, guilt gnawing at her insides like a relentless beast. She wanted to tell him, wanted to scream that his mother had just tried to buy her off, that Evelyn Westwood had looked her in the eye and told her to disappear, as if she were nothing. But the memory of Evelyn's cold, calculating smile burned through her mind, the unspoken threat in those dark eyes chilling her to the bone. People don't change. They just get better at hiding what they really are. Lily swallowed, forcing herself to keep smiling, forcing herself to keep breathing. "I know," she said softly, pulling her hand from Daniel's grip and taking a shaky step back. "I just need some air." Daniel's eyes darkened, his jaw tightening. But he nodded, his shoulders slumping as he watched her walk away. Lily hurried down the garden path, her heels clicking against the stone, her chest heaving, her vision blurring. The garden stretched before her like a labyrinth, the hedges tall and ominous, the air heavy with the scent of roses and secrets. And then she heard it. The sound of voices drifting from the other side of the hedge, one sharp and biting. The other was desperate and pleading. Lily's breath hitched as she moved closer, her pulse pounding like a drum. Vanessa's voice sliced through the air, venomous and frantic. "Please, Mrs. Westwood," Vanessa begged, her voice trembling, breaking. "You can't do this to me. You know what my father will say. You know what he'll do." Evelyn's voice was as smooth and cold as a knife's edge. "Your father has no power here," she said, her tone dripping with disdain. "You were warned. Vanessa, you were told to keep your mouth shut, to keep your claws off Lily, but you just couldn't help yourself. Could you?" Lily's heart raced, her fingers digging into the hedge, the sharp thorns biting into her skin as she peered through the leaves. Vanessa was on her knees, mascara streaming down her cheeks, her hair disheveled, eyes wild. Evelyn loomed over her, a dark, regal figure silhouetted against the dying light, her smile cruel and gleaming. "You think you're untouchable?" Evelyn said, her voice dropping to a deadly whisper. "You think you can stomp on anyone? That your daddy's money will save you? But you're wrong," Vanessa whimpered, her shoulders shaking, her nails clawing at the grass as Evelyn leaned closer, her eyes glinting like shards of ice. "Do you know what happens to people who cross me?" Evelyn whispered, her voice a silk-wrapped blade. "They disappear." Vanessa's breath hitched, her eyes widening in terror as Evelyn straightened, her expression calm, her lips curving into a cold, victorious smile. "Now get up," Evelyn said, her voice cutting through the night like a whip. "Get up, wipe those tears, and walk away with what little dignity you have left. Because the next time you step out of line, Vanessa, there won't be a second chance." Vanessa scrambled to her feet, her knees wobbling, her face ghostly pale as she staggered down the garden path, her sobs echoing through the night. Evelyn watched her go, her eyes dark and glittering, her smile sharp and deadly. And then Evelyn turned, her gaze slicing through the hedge, her eyes locking onto Lily's with terrifying precision. Lily's breath caught in her throat, her blood turning to ice as Evelyn's smile widened, her eyes glinting with dark amusement. "I see you, Lily," Evelyn said, her voice soft, almost sweet, "and I hope you're paying attention." And as Evelyn walked away, her heels clicking against the stone, the black envelope in Lily's hand felt heavier than ever. A ticking time bomb, counting down to the moment Evelyn Westwood decided to detonate it. Lily's hands trembled as she paced the guest room, the black envelope burning a hole through her palm. Outside the window, the night loomed dark and suffocating, the moon swallowed by storm clouds, the wind howling like a warning. Evelyn's words echoed through her mind, each syllable a poison seeping deeper into her veins. "I see you, Lily, and I hope you're paying attention." The weight of the envelope pressed down on her, heavy and menacing, like a stone tied to her ankle, dragging her into the abyss. A soft knock echoed through the room, and Lily flinched, her heart leaping into her throat. The door creaked open, and Daniel stepped inside, his face drawn, eyes clouded with worry. "Lily," he said, his voice soft, hesitant. "Are you okay? You've been up here for hours." Lily swallowed, forcing a tight smile, her fingers clenching around the envelope. "I'm fine," she said, her voice thin and brittle, as fragile as glass. Daniel stepped closer, his eyes searching hers, his brow furrowing. "What's that?" he asked, nodding toward the envelope. Lily's pulse spiked, panic flashing through her eyes. "Nothing," she said too quickly, shoving the envelope behind her back, her heart slamming against her ribs. Daniel's eyes narrowed, suspicion flickering behind them. "Lily," he said, his voice dropping, his jaw tightening. "What's going on? You're shaking." Lily opened her mouth, but no words came out. The truth pressed against the back of her teeth, clawing to escape, but the memory of Evelyn's icy smile held it back. A blade pressed against her throat. "It's nothing," she repeated, her voice cracking, her eyes darting away. "I just need some air." Before Daniel could respond, Lily slipped past him, her heels clicking against the floor, her breath coming in sharp, shallow gasps. The hallway stretched before her like a dark, endless tunnel, the shadows twisting and contorting like ghostly fingers reaching for her. The walls seemed to close in, Evelyn's voice echoing through her mind, taunting, mocking, relentless. "Are you sure you're ready to walk away from that?" Lily's chest tightened as she stumbled down the staircase, the world spinning around her in a dizzying blur of gold and marble. She burst through the back doors, the cold night air hitting her like a slap, the wind howling through the trees, the mansion looming behind her like a monstrous shadow. Lily's breaths came in ragged gasps as she dropped to her knees in the garden, her fingers clawing at the grass, the black envelope tumbling from her grasp, landing face down in the dirt. Her shoulders shook as sobs racked her body, tears streaming down her face, Evelyn's words slicing through her mind like shards of glass. "People don't change. They just get better at hiding what they really are." Lily. The voice was soft, familiar. Lily's head snapped up, her heart stuttering in her chest as she saw Vanessa standing a few feet away, her face pale and tear-streaked, her eyes hollow and haunted. "What are you doing out here?" Vanessa asked, her voice trembling, her arms wrapped around herself as if to hold herself together. Lily swallowed, wiping at her tears, her breath hitching. "I could ask you the same thing." Vanessa's jaw clenched, her eyes darting to the envelope in the dirt, her lips pressing into a thin, grim line. "She offered you money, didn't she?" Vanessa said, her voice hard, her eyes blazing. "To leave Daniel." Lily's breath caught, her stomach twisting into a knot. "How did you—" "Because she did the same to me," Vanessa said, her voice breaking, her eyes shimmering with tears. 2 years ago, before she knew you existed, I was Daniel's girlfriend. I thought he was going to propose, but then Evelyn found out. Lily's blood ran cold, her hands shaking as Vanessa took a step closer, her eyes dark and empty. "She offered me $1 million to leave," Vanessa said, her lips trembling. "Told me I wasn't good enough. Told me I'd never be good enough. And when I refused, she ruined me, had me blacklisted, turned Daniel against me, made me out to be a gold-digging liar." And he believed her. Lily's heart pounded, nausea rising in her throat as Vanessa dropped to her knees in the grass, her shoulders slumping, her eyes glazed. "I tried to fight back," Vanessa whispered, her voice a hollow shell. "But you can't win against Evelyn Westwood. She's a monster." Lily's pulse thundered, her vision blurring as she stared down at the envelope, the black, glossy surface glinting beneath the moonlight like a blade. Evelyn's face flashed through her mind, her cold, cruel smile, her eyes dark and bottomless. "People don't change. They just get better at hiding what they really are." Lily clenched her fists, her jaw setting, her heart slamming against her chest. Evelyn had tested her, tried to buy her, tried to break her, but she was done being scared. She was done being silenced. She was done playing by Evelyn Westwood's rules. Lily pushed to her feet, her shoulders squaring, her eyes blazing as she turned toward the mansion, the wind whipping through her hair, her blood boiling with newfound resolve. The black envelope lay forgotten in the dirt, its edges torn, its contents crumpled, because Lily didn't need it. She didn't need Evelyn's money, and she sure as hell wasn't going anywhere. Not until Evelyn Westwood learned what it felt like to lose, not until the queen of this castle was brought to her knees. Lily stormed back into the mansion, her heels pounding against the marble floor, her heart a drumbeat of fury echoing through her veins. The chandeliers above cast fractured light against the walls, shadows dancing like ghosts as she moved through the hallway. She could hear laughter drifting from the dining room. Evelyn's laughter, cold and sharp, a knife disguised as a melody. Lily's jaw clenched, her fists trembling at her sides. No more hiding, no more playing the quiet, obedient girl. Tonight, Evelyn Westwood was going to hear her roar. The dining room doors loomed before her, heavy and foreboding, the muffled sound of Evelyn's voice seeping through the crack. Lily pushed them open with a force that echoed through the room, the wood slamming against the walls, every eye snapping toward her. Evelyn sat at the head of the table, a glass of wine poised delicately between her manicured fingers, her expression calm, a glacial smile curving her lips. Daniel sat beside her, his brows knitting together in concern as Lily stepped forward, her chest heaving, her eyes blazing. "Lily?" Daniel said, his voice uncertain, eyes flicking between her and Evelyn. "What's going on?" But Lily's eyes were locked onto Evelyn's, her gaze fierce and unrelenting. "Tell him," Lily said, her voice a low, controlled growl. "Tell him what you did." Evelyn's smile didn't falter, but her eyes darkened, a shadow passing over her flawless features. "I'm not sure I know what you're talking about," Evelyn said, her voice calm, sipping her wine as if Lily were nothing more than a child throwing a tantrum. Lily's blood boiled, her hands shaking as she slammed the black envelope onto the table, the contents spilling out. The check, crumpled and torn, the ink smeared like a confession bleeding across the page. "This," Lily spat, her eyes never leaving Evelyn's. "This is what you did." Daniel's face blanched, his eyes widening as he reached for the check, his hands trembling. "Mother," he said, his voice cracking. "What is this?" Evelyn set down her glass, her smile dropping, her eyes narrowing into slits. "It's nothing," she said, her voice clipped, her jaw tight. "Just a misunderstanding." "A misunderstanding," Lily's voice rose, her fists clenching at her sides. "You tried to pay me off. You tried to buy me out of your son's life." Gasps echoed around the room, the staff frozen in place, eyes wide, breaths held. Evelyn's expression hardened, her eyes dark as a stormy sea. "And why shouldn't I?" she said, her voice dropping to a venomous whisper, her mask slipping, her true self rising like a serpent from the depths. "You're nothing but a secretary, a nobody. Do you think I don't know what you're after? You're just like Vanessa? A gold digger, a parasite latching onto my son for a free ride." Daniel flinched as if struck, his eyes darting to Lily, pain flashing through them like lightning. "Lily," he said, his voice breaking. "Is that true?" Tears burned in Lily's eyes, but she refused to let them fall. "No," she said, her voice strong, her back straight. "I love you, Daniel, not your money, not your name, you." Evelyn rose from her seat, her heels clicking against the floor, her gaze a dagger slicing through the room. "Then prove it," she said, her voice a soft, deadly purr. "Walk away. Walk away right now and show me that you're not just another Vanessa. Walk away and leave Daniel behind. If you really love him, that shouldn't be a problem, right?" Lily's breath hitched, her heart pounding like a hammer against her ribs. Daniel's eyes were locked onto hers, wide and pleading, his jaw clenched, his fist tight. "Lily," he whispered, voice trembling, "don't do this." Lily swallowed, her chest heaving, the room spinning around her, Evelyn's face a cruel, unrelenting mask of triumph. "Fine," Lily said, her voice breaking, her eyes shimmering with tears as she turned to Daniel, forcing herself to look into those eyes one last time. "Goodbye, Daniel." Daniel's face crumpled, his eyes filling with hurt, his hands reaching for her, but Lily pulled away, her heart shattering with every step as she fled from the room. Evelyn's cold laughter echoing behind her like a haunting refrain. Lily's heels echoed through the hallway, her breaths coming in sharp, ragged bursts as she stumbled toward the door, her vision blurring, tears spilling down her cheeks like rain. The mansion loomed behind her like a dark, oppressive castle, the doors slamming shut with a deafening crash that reverberated through her soul. Outside, the wind howled, whipping through her hair, tearing at her dress, but she didn't stop. She couldn't. She kept walking, her heels sinking into the mud, her breaths hitching, Evelyn's voice a relentless, taunting whisper in her mind. "You're nothing. You're nobody. You're just another Vanessa." Lily's knees buckled, and she sank to the ground, the cold rain pelting her skin, her sobs muffled by the storm. She had walked away from the man she loved. She had walked away from everything, and Evelyn Westwood had won. Or so she thought. Because as Lily knelt there, her heart splintering into 1,000 pieces, a dark, dangerous resolve ignited within her. Evelyn thought she had broken her. Evelyn thought she had won. But Lily wasn't done yet. Not even close. Because the one thing Evelyn Westwood underestimated was just how far a woman with nothing left to lose was willing to go to get justice. And Lily Evans was ready to burn it all down. The rain pounded against the mansion like 1,000 fists, lightning splintering the sky in jagged bursts of white. Inside, Evelyn Westwood stood at the window, her manicured fingers wrapped around a glass of red wine, her expression calm, satisfied, victorious. The storm raged outside, but within these walls, Evelyn was untouchable, a queen in her fortress of glass and steel. A soft knock echoed through the room. Evelyn's eyes remained fixed on the rain-soaked night, her smile a cold, cruel curve. "Enter," she said, her voice a low, sultry purr. The door opened, and Daniel stepped inside, his face drawn, eyes hollow, the weight of Lily's departure hanging around his neck like a noose. "You're pleased with yourself, aren't you?" he said, his voice tight, every syllable dripping with bitterness. Evelyn's smile widened, her eyes still fixed on the window. "I did what was necessary," she said, her voice smooth as silk. "I protected you from another gold digger, another Vanessa." Daniel's jaw clenched, his fists curling at his sides. "You had no right," he said, his voice rising, each word a bullet loaded with fury. "I loved her, Mother. I still love her." Evelyn's eyes flicked to him, her gaze cool and detached. "Love," she said, her tone dripping with disdain. "You think she loved you? You think she wasn't just another girl chasing the Westwood fortune?" Daniel shook his head, his chest heaving, his eyes glistening with tears. "You don't know her," he said, his voice cracking. "You don't know what you just destroyed." Evelyn set the glass down with a soft, deliberate clink, her eyes boring into him, her expression hard as stone. "I saved you," she said, her voice dropping to a deadly whisper. "One day, you'll thank me." A sudden crash echoed through the mansion, the sound of glass shattering, of something heavy hitting the ground. Evelyn's brows knitted together, her lips pressing into a thin, tight line. "What was that?" she said, her tone sharp, eyes flashing. Daniel's heart pounded, his pulse roaring in his ears as he stepped into the hallway, the sound of voices rising. Shouts, yells, the unmistakable chaos of a storm inside a house. Evelyn followed, her heels clicking against the marble, her eyes dark and narrowed as they reached the grand hall. The chandelier swung violently above, casting wild, spinning shadows against the walls, and in the center of it all stood Lily. Her hair was plastered to her face, her dress soaked through, her eyes blazing with fury and defiance as she stood surrounded by shards of broken glass and toppled furniture. Security guards loomed around her, but they hesitated, eyes darting nervously to Evelyn, awaiting orders. Lily Daniels shouted, rushing forward, but Lily held up a hand, stopping him cold, her gaze fixed solely on Evelyn. "Hello, Evelyn," Lily said, her voice cold and sharp, each word dripping like venom. "Did you miss me?" Evelyn's eyes narrowed, her jaw clenched, a flicker of something dark and dangerous flashing behind her calm facade. "What the hell do you think you're doing?" she hissed, stepping forward, her heels crunching over glass. Lily's lips twisted into a bitter smile, her eyes gleaming like molten steel. "You thought you could break me," she said, her voice rising, echoing through the hall, each word striking like a hammer. "You thought you could buy me, silence me, make me disappear." Evelyn's expression remained icy, her eyes burning with fury. "Get her out of here!" She barked at the guards, her voice cracking like a whip, but the guards didn't move. They stood frozen, eyes wide, fear flickering across their faces. "Go ahead," Lily said, her voice dropping to a deadly whisper, her gaze locked onto Evelyn's. "Throw me out, but not before you hear what I have to say." Evelyn's jaw tightened, her nails digging into her palms, the veins in her neck throbbing beneath her skin. "You're done here," she said, her voice trembling with barely restrained rage. "You're nothing." Lily stepped closer, her breath ragged, her fists clenched, the storm outside roaring like a beast ready to break free. "You're right," she said, her voice breaking, tears spilling down her cheeks, mixing with the rain. "I am nothing, but you're a monster." Evelyn's eyes widened, her nostrils flaring, but Lily pressed on, her voice shaking with raw, unfiltered emotion. "You destroyed Vanessa. You tried to destroy me. You pretend to protect your son, but all you do is control him, manipulate him, and suffocate him. You're so afraid of losing power that you'd rather see him alone and miserable than happy with someone you didn't choose." Daniel's eyes filled with tears, his shoulders slumping, his fists trembling at his sides. "Lily," he whispered, his voice breaking. Lily turned to him, her expression softening, her eyes shimmering with tears. "I love you," she said, her voice thick, her throat tight, "but I can't be part of this, not if it means losing myself." Lily took a shaky breath, her eyes flicking back to Evelyn, who stood stone-faced and silent, her jaw clenched, her eyes dark as a storm. "You may have won this time," Lily said, her voice a low, fierce growl, "but you don't scare me. Evelyn, not anymore." Lily turned on her heel, her heels clicking against the glass-strewn floor as she strode toward the door, her heart hammering, her breath coming in ragged gasps. Daniel reached for her, his eyes desperate, but Lily didn't look back. She couldn't. If she did, she knew she'd break. The door slammed behind her, the sound echoing through the mansion like a gunshot. Evelyn stood in the center of the room, her chest heaving, her eyes fixed on the door, her nails digging into her palms until they drew blood. Daniel stared at his mother, his eyes burning with betrayal, his fists clenched. "You did this," he said, his voice shaking, his jaw clenched. "You pushed her away. You pushed everyone away." Evelyn's lips trembled, her breath coming in sharp, shallow bursts. But she said nothing, because for the first time, the walls around her felt too big, too empty, too silent, and the storm outside raged on, wind howling like a warning, the glass trembling in its frame, and Evelyn Westwood stood alone, surrounded by shattered glass and a silence so heavy it pressed down like a tombstone, because she had won the battle. But she had lost everything else, and the victory never tasted so bitter.